Everyone thinks war is just constant explosions and yelling, but the weirdest part is actually the waiting. You are standing in a ditch dug into a random farm field somewhere in Europe, and it is just incredibly boring for days on end. You look around and everything is just brown dirt. The walls are dirt and the floor is mud, and your clothes are completely caked in it. You smell like wet earth and sweat and things that are rotting just out of sight, and you sort of realize pretty quickly that you are just living inside a hole in the ground. So you wake up before the sun even comes up, because that is when an attack is most likely to happen. The sky is this dark, bruised purple color, and the air is freezing cold. You are holding your rifle, and your hands are numb, and you are just staring at the wall of dirt in front of you. You can hear the guys next to you breathing and shifting their weight in the mud. Everyone is just tense. You are all waiting for something terrible to happen, and the silence is so heavy it makes your ears ring. But then the sun finally peeks over the edge of the field, and nothing happens. The tension sort of drains out of everyone, and you just settle in for another totally normal day of living in a ditch. The main thing you actually end up fighting every single day is the water. The movies show guys shooting at each other, but they never really show how wet everything is, because you are dug down deep into the earth, and whenever it rains, the water has nowhere to go. It just pools at the bottom of the trench. You are standing in freezing water that goes up to your ankles or sometimes your knees. Your boots get soaked through and your socks are wet, and they stay wet for weeks at a time. Your feet get numb, and then they start to hurt in this deep, aching way. You try to find old wooden boards or empty ammunition boxes to stand on just to get an inch above the puddle, but the mud is so thick it just sucks everything down. You drop a tool or a spoon, and it disappears into the brown sludge forever. And because of all that water, the walls of the ditch are always falling apart, so your entire day is basically just doing heavy manual labor. You are using a little shovel to scoop mud out of the bottom and throw it over the top. You are filling bags with sand and stacking them up against the sides so the whole thing does not collapse in on you while you sleep. Your back constantly aches, and your hands are covered in blisters. You are exhausted all the time because you never get more than a few hours of sleep at a time. You just curl up in a little cutout in the dirt wall and wrap a damp blanket around yourself and try to ignore the cold. The thing is, you can never look up. That's a really hard habit to break when you first get down there. If you want to see what's happening across the field, you can't just pop your head over the edge. There are guys on the other side doing the exact same thing as you, and they are just watching your line with rifles. If anything moves above the dirt, they shoot at it. So you spend all your time looking at the sky or looking at the mud. You feel completely cut off from the rest of the world. You are basically living in a hallway without a roof. Food becomes a really big deal because there is absolutely nothing else to look forward to. But the food is always cold, and it usually comes out of a tin can. You are sitting on an empty box trying to eat some kind of hardened meat or a biscuit that is tough enough to break your teeth. And you're always trying to keep the dirt out of your food, but it's impossible. The wind blows and a fine layer of dust just coats whatever you're eating. You just sort of get used to the crunch. You drink water out of a metal canteen, and it always tastes a little bit like oil or chemicals. And you're never really alone, but you feel incredibly lonely. You are packed in with all these other guys, and you know all of their habits and exactly what their breathing sounds like. You see them writing letters home on little scraps of dirty paper. You watch a guy staring at a picture of his family that he keeps wrapped in oilcloth to keep the moisture out. You talk about what you're going to do when you get out of the hole and go back home, but there's always this underlying feeling that you might not actually leave. You just keep having the same conversations over and over because nobody has any new stories to tell. Then the sun goes down and everything changes entirely. The daytime is boring, but the nighttime is terrifying because it gets so dark you can't see your own hand in front of your face. You are standing on duty, peering out into the blackness across the field. Every single shadow looks like someone crawling toward you. The wind blows a piece of trash across the mud, and your heart jumps into your throat. You grip your rifle so hard your knuckles ache. You are just straining your eyes, trying to catch any movement at all. Sometimes you are the one who has to go out there. They tell you and a couple of other guys to crawl out into the empty space between your ditch and the other side to fix the barbed wire. You slide over the edge, and suddenly you are completely exposed. You are crawling on your stomach through the freezing mud. You can smell the things that have been left out in the field for weeks. You are dragging a heavy roll of wire and trying to be completely silent. If you snap a twig or clink your tool against a metal post, the guys on the other side will hear you. So you're moving inches at a time, and suddenly there's this loud popping sound high up in the air. A flare shoots up into the sky and bursts into this blinding white light. Everything is lit up like it's the middle of the day. You just freeze completely. You press your face down into the mud and you don't even breathe. You feel totally naked. You know people are looking out across the field, and you are just hoping you look like a pile of dirt or an old sandbag. The flare slowly drifts down on a little parachute, and the shadows stretch out incredibly long across the broken ground. It takes a few minutes for the light to burn out, and then you are plunged back into total darkness. Your eyes have to adjust all over again. You finish tying off the wire, and you crawl back to your ditch as fast as you can without making a sound. Slipping back down into the trench actually feels like coming home. It feels safe, even though it's just a wet hole in the earth. Because the real fear is always the big guns. The rifles you sort of understand, but the massive cannons miles away are completely random. You'll just be sitting there eating a piece of hard bread, and suddenly the ground starts to shake. You hear this sound like a train rushing directly over your head. Then a section of the trench 50 yards away just explodes. A huge geyser of brown dirt and black smoke shoots up into the sky. The noise is so loud it actually hurts your chest. It feels like the air is being sucked out of your lungs. And then it just keeps happening. Shell after shell comes screaming down. You press yourself into the bottom of the trench and cover the back of your neck with your hands. The whole earth is bouncing and vibrating. Dirt is raining down on your back. You can't hear the guy next to you screaming because the explosions are just one continuous noise of noise. You feel completely helpless. There is absolutely nothing you can do to protect yourself. You are just hoping the next one doesn't land directly on top of you. You close your eyes and you just wait. Sometimes it goes on for hours. You completely lose track of time. Your brain just sort of shuts down to protect itself. You forget where you are, and you just focus on the texture of the mud against your cheek. And then, eventually, the loud crashing stops. The silence that comes after is almost as painful as the noise. Your ears are ringing so loudly you can barely hear the guys shouting down the line. You stand up and shake the dirt off your shoulders. You look down the trench, and part of the wall has completely caved in. The wooden supports are splintered and broken. So you pick up your shovel, you walk over to the collapsed section, and you start digging the mud out all over again. You have to rebuild the wall before it rains again. You just get right back to the manual labor because if you stop working, you might start thinking about what just happened. The sun starts to come up again, and it's that same bruised purple color. You are exhausted and freezing, and you are standing in ankle-deep water. You lean against the dirt wall and hold your rifle, and you just go back to waiting.